Play Your Cards Right. How to Use Card Games to Increase Learning Outcomes. Hosted by HRDQ-U and presented by Dr. Sivasailam, Thiagarajan and Tracy Tagliati. Today's webinar will last around 1 hour. If you have any questions, you can always type them into the questions box. We will be answering questions as they come in live at the end of the presentation or as they follow up by email. My name is Sarah Schaefer, and I will moderate today's webinar. Thiagi is a resident mad scientist at the Thiagi Group. He published 40 books, over 100 games and simulations, and more than 200 articles. Thiagi has made hundreds of presentations and keynote speeches at professional conferences. Tracy is the training manager at Move Inc., an associate at the Thiagi Group. She specializes in activity-based training, both instructor-led and web-based environments. Tracy is active in the American Society for Training and Development, the North American Simulation and Gaming Association, and the International Society for Performance Improvement. Welcome and thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you. Hey, Thiagi. Hi, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you? Hi, folks. I'm Thiagi. I'm Tracy's assistant. And let me tell you a couple of things about Tracy. I do webinars once a month, and Tracy does webinars almost once every day. So that's a claim for fame.
That's true. My claim to fame. So Thiagi, we want to share with the folks who are listening today how to use card games to build fluency and to increase learning outcomes. So let's get started.
I didn't realize that. I thought today's session was on transcendental meditation. I'm not able to advance the slides. Sarah, would you advance the slides for us? Yes. Okay, here's our objectives. The first objective is to provide you an overview of the HRDQ style profiles. In case you're not already familiar with them, we'll give you a light overview. And the next objective is we are going to be sharing with you 3 different types of card games. And by the way, each type of card games has 20 different specific games to go with it. So we will probably get confused as to which, are we talking about the type of card games, are we talking about the card game, and so on. So that's our second objective, to explore, to experience 3 kinds of card games.
And we're going to use the same deck of cards to play different card games. So there'll be 3 different sets of cards. And don't worry if it sounds a little confusing in the moment, because we have resources that you will be able to download at a later date with all the information plus a whole lot more.
And the final objective is we want you to play the games, enjoy the games, experience the games, but most importantly, steal the games, plagiarize the game. Take the structure of the games and plug in your own content to create your own games. The only request we have is if you become a millionaire selling card games, please give us 10%.
All right, Thiagi, let's share with them the formats that we're going to be using.
Okay, there are 3 types of card games, as we said. One type is called classification cards, like what style are you and which MBTI category do you belong to. The second type of cards have tips, practical pieces of advice printed on them, like buy low, sell high, or is it the other way around? And the third type of cards are called fluency cards, and they ask you to do 4 different things. So 3 types of cards. Each deck of cards has 52 different cards, and each of these types of cards serve a different function. Okay, Tracy, let us get some
initial content provided to them so they can better understand the card games.
All right, let's hear more about the HRDQ style profiles then. If you're not already familiar, let me give you a light overview. You can see in the upper left-hand corner the red triangle that has direct. And people that are direct, you can see by looking at the left-hand bar that these are very task-oriented people, also very logic-oriented, low expressiveness. These are the type of people who control their emotion, but they're going to tell you versus asking you things. You can see by looking at the upper bar that these people are typically faster paced, meaning they talk fast and they walk fast, and they're highly assertive. Now, next to the direct, moving over to the right, are the spirited people. And like the direct, they are the folks that tell people also, and they are also faster paced and highly assertive. But unlike the direct folks, these people are people-oriented. It's all about who's going to be there, right? And they tend to be highly expressive in contrast to the direct that are lower expressiveness. Now, and also you can notice that they display their emotions versus controlling their emotions. Now, looking below, underneath the spirited, you can see the considerate folks. And the considerate folks also display their emotions. But unlike the spirited people, they are slower paced or more moderately paced in the rate of speech and the way they talk and the way that they move. And unlike the spirited people that tell you what they want, they're going to ask you what they want. But you will see that they are also people-oriented and highly expressive, just like the spirited. Now, moving back over to the left, you can see the blue box that has the systematic group of people. And these people are like the considerate in that they ask versus telling, and they are more moderately paced and lower in their assertiveness. But unlike the considerate folks who display their emotions and who are people-oriented, the systematic people control their emotions. And they are, again, task-oriented or logic-oriented and lower in expressiveness, like the direct folks. So that gives you a high overview of the HRDQ style profiles. Thiagi, why don't you give them a little bit more additional information?
Thank you, Tracy. They don't need any additional information because you did such a brilliant job of explaining everything. And I can't give them additional information until you move to the next slide for me, please. That. Okay, folks, here's a cheat sheet. In case you don't remember everything Tracy said, here is a neat little table with its 4 styles: direct, spirited, considerate, and systematic. And on each of the rows, different types of behaviors associated with these styles. For example, let us assume that if you touch me, I start shivering and getting uncomfortable. Which style do I belong to? Good. Okay. Yes, you are right, because under systematic it says avoids touching. So take a look at this. This is the cheat sheet. But let us take you to the games. The theory behind the games, as we can see on the next slide, is...
Actually, Thiagi, before they go into the games, I would like to do a self-assessment with them, because we gave them a light overview of the topic, right? And I would like them to rate themselves now on how well they think they understand the HRDQ style profile. On a scale of 1 to 5, are they not confident at all, meaning they don't get it? Or are they very confident, like that they're an expert? So how would you rate yourself? Type in the chat box now, how would you rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 5? And I can see some people are saying there are 4, there are 5, there are 3, a couple of 2s coming in, some 3s. Exactly right, 2s, 3s. I see a lot of 2s and 3s coming through, Thiagi.
Yes, and I am a 1.
You're one. Well, that's the whole point of the card games, is to build fluency, because it's not enough to tell people about content, right? You have to really have them engage with it, and that's the value of the card games. So let us share with you some card games now. Thiagi, tell them about them.
Okay, so one way of learning, if you are a one or so, one way of learning this is to suffer through death by PowerPoint. We decided to make it less confusing and torturous on the participants. So instead of listening to a lecture, we have them play card games. And there are 3 different types of card games. They are classification cards, practical advice cards, fluency cards. You don't have to worry about any of them, because we will have you actually experience each of these card games. Usually, we have a deck of cards, we sit around the table, somebody shuffles, somebody cuts, we deal cards, things of that nature. But what Tracy has done for today is converted these tabletop card games into webinar-based card games. So we are going to start with the first series of card games. So Tracy, can we go to the next slide? These are classification card games. And if you look at the next slide, here is the package which HRDQ has. As you can see on the left side where it says playing with style, nice title for the card game. That is a booklet. This booklet contains 12 different games that can be played with the deck of cards. And the handouts related to the booklet, you can copy them from the booklet, or as you can see, that is a disk, and you can insert the disk into your computer and massage it to print it out. The key element is a set of 52 cards, and as you can see, each card contains a card index. So you have a close-up of the King of Spades, and each card also contains, most important part, a behavior or a statement or an item. This one says, before I make a decision, I consider how it will affect others. So this is a statement, and the same statement is also printed the other way around at the bottom of the card. So you don't have to stand on your head to read what is at the bottom of the card, because it's just a mirror image. Your job as a part of all of the games is to decide to which of the 4 styles does this particular statement belong. And later on, when you play the game, if there is a dispute, we pull out the table which is called the feedback table. King of Spades, before I make a decision, I consider how it will affect others. If you look at the table next to King of Spades, it says considerate. That is the official classification. The judge's decisions are final. You cannot complain with these decisions. And by the way, you don't have access to the feedback table unless somebody challenges somebody's classification and things of that nature. So that is the background in terms of what the cards look like, what the stuff you have to play. So Tracy, let us play one of your webinar special games.
Right. So again, as Thiagi said, we've adapted the games for a webinar, so you get a flavor of how they go. And of course, you can get these great cards at HRDQ, or you can make your own. But let me give the instructions of how we're going to play this classification type of a game. Right? So here are your instructions. You're going to review the text on the card, similar to the one you saw on the prior slides. Then you're going to decide which one of the personal styles each card is associated with, because we're going to announce one of the 4 styles, and your job is to determine which card represents that style by correctly typing it in the chat box. Are you ready? Here we go.
Okay, folks. You see card number 1, 2, 3, and 4 as a club, 7 of hearts, Queen of Diamonds, King of Diamonds. These cards could be from any style. Here is what I want for you to do. Can you please locate the card which belongs to the spirited style? Once you figured it out, can you type on your question area, your chat box, which of the 4 cards? You can type the number 1, 2, 3, or 4. Which one belongs to the spirited category?
Thiagi, almost everybody is getting it right. I'm watching the chat box. But we'll just see how many as people finish so that we can reveal the correct answer. And remember,
they all know all the correct answers. Maybe we should cancel this session and go to transcendental meditation.
And remember, the spirited people are the ones that are highly assertive and highly animated and that talk at a popular pace, fast-paced. And there seem to be the group of people who like to be with others.
Okay, you guys did good with identifying the spirited cards. And now, can you identify the card that is associated with the systematic style? The systematic style. Let me give you a clue. That's not me. Okay, start typing 1, 2, 3, or 4.
Everybody I see is typing it. Oh, there's a couple people who are typing something different, but I do see most people are getting it correct. Are you going to reveal the right answer, Thiagi?
No, let them die in suspense.
Okay, we'll reveal it at the end.
Okay, everybody ready? Okay, actually, Tracy, will you identify the correct answer? Nothing like immediate feedback.
Right. The systematic was number 4, or if you wrote the King of Diamonds, you were correct. And if you were wondering which one was the correct response for the spirited, that was number 2, or the 7 of Hearts, right? Okay, good. So give yourself a pat on the back, and of course this game is going to get easier now that we've revealed 2 of them.
Okay, folks. Actually, it is going to get tougher now. And you find the behavior, the item, the statement associated with, you ready? Direct style, direct style. Start typing.
Okay, most everybody is getting that one correct.
That is,
and remember,
most of them are direct paper.
That's true.
That is number 3. During meetings, I like to lead the conversation. Folks, this is going to be the toughest one. I'm going to name one other type style, and you decide which of the 4 cards belongs to this type. Okay, ready? Considerate. Figure out which card belongs to the considerate style and type.
Very good. Everybody's getting that one correct, of course. Ace, the Ace of Clubs. To avoid conflict, I often tell people what they want to hear. And again, this is a game that's been adapted for a webinar, but in a classroom situation, you would have a total of 52 cards divided equally with each one of the 4 profiles. So we've adapted it for the webinar so you can see what it looks like. And there's many games you can play, so let's try playing another game. And this game is called Straight. Okay, so here's what your instructions are for the game Straight. To read the text on the 3 cards on the following slide. We'll show it to you in just a moment. But what we want you to do is identify the personal styles of each card, similar to what you did before, but not to type them in the chat box. This time, just to jot them down where you are, okay? So here we go, because there'll be more instructions that are going to follow. So first of all, identify the styles of each of these following cards. All right, so now we're ready for the second set of instructions. And the second set of instructions said, read the text on the following, four cards on the following slide, and now vote or identify which card to add so that your card or your hand now has one card of each one of the personal styles. Just like if you were playing straight with a game of poker or something of that nature. All right, so we'll be quiet, let you read through them. Which one would you add?
Oh, so you mean I would like to find a card which was not one of the three cards?
Exactly.
So, I forgot what were the three, but I have jotted it down on my tablet.
Well, everybody else is getting it right, Thiagi. I'm looking through the chat box, and everybody is responding with number 2, and number 2 is correct, right? That's the systematic, that I like charts and graphs in my work area. So give yourself a pat on the back so that you understand that for getting that correct. Terrific. So the work or the facilitator guide that comes with the HRDQ book has a total of 10 games you can play. We shared with you 2 of the games that you can play, but there are many more. We'd like to share with you now some different types of cards, and these are called practical advice cards. And we're going to show you, or Sarah is going to show you at the end of the webinar, how you can download a booklet for free on practical advice games. And Thiagi has created a lot of games on many different topics that deal with practical advice cards. You can see a sample of them here. And but you would be able to create your own practical advice cards using the HRDQ profile styles, and then playing the games as you see in the booklet there. So instead of talking about it, let's play, Thiagi.
Okay, folks, as you saw in the earlier picture, there are 52 cards, like regular playing cards with playing card indexes, and each card contains a piece of practical advice. So if you're working on communication styles, this piece of advice will be related to how to better communicate or how to use the different HRDQ styles when you're having a flexible communicative meeting type of a thing. So let me move on to the instructions for the first game, the game we are going to be playing, which is called the best advice. And Tracy, I'm going to take a few minutes, since we have time, to explain how the game is played on the tabletop. So primarily on the tabletop, the way people play the game, each person gets 5 cards. And that person looks at the 5 cards in his hand and pulls out one card which he thinks is the best, the most useful practical piece of advice, and places it in front of him, printed side down. So let us say there are 5 players, each person takes a card, puts it down, and somebody mixes up all of the cards and turn them face up, and each card is read, and people now decide of the 5 pieces of best advice from individual hands, which one is the best of the best. So the idea behind this particular game is to make people process the information rather than just reading it, evaluating the information rather than mindlessly accepting it and asking themselves, which is the best piece of advice for my situation. So that is what we are going to be doing. So Trace, can you pretend they're getting these cards?
All right, so in this case, we're going to give you 4 cards, and we're going to ask you which piece of advice would have the biggest impact when communicating with a direct communicator. Which one would be the best piece of advice? Type in the chat box.
And this is your personal opinion.
I see number 3 and 4 coming up a lot. Somebody said 7. Who said 7? Oh, the 7 of spades. That's what you meant. Okay. When you're talking to a direct communicator, focus on their goals and objectives. And number 3, be well organized when talking to a direct communicator. Oh, here's a number 2. Keep your relationship businesslike when working with a direct communicator. So we have mostly 3s and 4s, Thiagi. Oh, somebody said all of them. Okay, and a few 2s. Okay, so you can see how this works. Now we could ask different types of questions also. We could say which one would be the least important, or which one would be the easiest for you to do, or which one would be the most difficult or challenging. The point is, again, is to have the participants continuously read the pieces of advice. That will help them absorb it, right? They're more engaged with the content. And then to make that comparison between them. So that also uses a higher level of learning in Bloom's taxonomy, doesn't it? So the idea is to ask different types of questions. And again, of course, in a classroom situation, you would have more than 4 pieces of advice. You'd likely have maybe even up to 8 or 16 or so forth. So this is just one example of a practical advice type of card game in that booklet, which will show you how to download. There's many others that you might want to play with the practical advice cards that you create. Let's show them another type of game now, Thiagi.
Tracy, can I stay on the previous slide for a moment?
Sure.
And let me show you how to play another game with the practical advice card. Most of you selected card number 4, the 4 of diamond. When you're talking to a direct communicator, focus on the goals and objectives. So I'm going to play another practical advice card game called Precautions. And this is how it works. Look at the advice. Focus on the goals and objectives. When you're talking to a direct communicator, focus on the goals and objectives. And here is a question for you, and I would like for you to type on the chat area. What could be a danger in mindlessly using this piece of advice? Every time you are talking to somebody else, a direct communicator, if you continuously, constantly, always focus on goals and the objectives, what can go wrong? What can backfire? What could be a disadvantage? So ponder on it. Our goal is to make sure you're not using this piece of advice without thinking about them. You're not abusing them. So can you go ahead and type what things can go wrong? Wow.
Thiagi, I'm already seeing some responses in the chat box. One person says your goals are ignored, or your objectives are ignored. There's no personal connections to somebody else. Somebody else says you might miss the bigger picture. You're not taking into account your own personal goals and objectives. You may miss deadlines.
And somebody says no buy-in. Somebody says too much of anything is bad. That's an ancient Hindu saying. So this is part 1 of the game called Precaution, which can be played with the practical advice cards. Here is the second part, folks. You have no problem identifying what can go wrong. What I would like for you now to type on the chat area a precaution, one additional piece of advice, a footnote or a PS. So before taking this idea and applying it, what additional precaution or caveat or advice would you like to add to that? So go ahead and type something like not always useful, don't stop thinking. Think something which will be a good precaution for people to keep in mind before they apply this piece of advice.
And Thiagi, I see one person says, keep them aligned with the business goals.
Wonderful. Balance, says Patricia. And Karen Minner says, don't put people in a singular category at all times. Hey, she is challenging the original thought about style categories. And Karen Endres says, this should not be your only focus when interacting with this type of person. So you get the idea, folks. We have cards with a different piece of advice, and we play games that will force people to organize, to prioritize, to deconstruct, to analyze, to apply, and things of that nature. Now that I have demonstrated my systematic nature, can we go to the next slide, Tracy?
Okay, sure. And these are the fluency type of cards. And this is a whole different deck. Thiagi, explain this type of deck.
Okay. So we believe fluency is a very important skill. By fluency, we mean a higher level of understanding, your ability to focus, compare, contrast, apply, things of that nature. So in the fluency card deck, there are 4 types of tasks required of you. For example, you see in the picture 3 of hearts, which says draw, gossip. And here, this is like playing Pictionary. Whoever takes the card has to draw a picture without showing what's the word on the card. The concept on the card is not revealed, but that person has to draw a picture which, when other people look at the picture, say, I know what you're trying to communicate. You're trying to communicate gossip. So there are 4 suits, clubs, hearts, spades, and diamonds, and each suit is associated with a different type of behavior. And rather than my explaining it, hey, Trace, let's play a game.
Right. Now, Thiagi, when you showed the example of the gossip, now that was for a different topic. That topic was for building trust. So if you were drawing for the topic of the HRDQ profiles, you might ask them to draw what the desk looks like of a systematic profile, or what does the, how does what does the suit or the appearance of a spirited person look like? So it would be different tasks than the one you see here. Let's play. Yes, let's go ahead and play so you get a better idea. So the first type of fluency card game we're going to play is the listing. And those are always on the spades cards, is the way we play it anyway. So let's have you type in the chat box the things that you would find on the desk of a systematic communicator. What are some things that you would find on their desk? Type in the chat box now. A stapler, schedules, calendars, yeah, nothing. It would be completely clean, right? A daily planner, right? Clean and very organized charts and graphs and schedules and daily planners, an iPhone, okay, an inbox, highlighters, right? You guys have got it. You're great. That's wonderful. Exactly right. All right, Thiagi, let's share them with another type of game. And of course,
I'm looking at my desk. I'm obviously not one of those guys.
Right. And of course, going back to the list ones, you could have a different task for a list, right? What's on the desk of a spirited communicator, or a list of things that you would find on a dominant communicator's desk. So there's different ways and different types of questions. All righty. So Thiagi.
Okay. All of the diamond cards is through King. all of the diamond cards gives you two concepts associated with the HRDQ styles. And this is a compare card. Your job is to compare the two different concepts. So this particular 4 diamond says a direct communicator and a considerate communicator. Here is the specific task for you folks. If your last name begins with the letters A through L, your job is to type one important similarity between a direct and a considerate communicator. In what ways are they similar to each other? Obviously, both of them are trying to communicate. So if your last name begins A through L, type an important similarity between these two concepts. And if you're one of the others, N through Z, if your last name begins with those letters, your job is to type one important difference between direct communicators and considerate communicators. Obviously, there are many, many differences, but we want you to type what you consider to be the most important difference. Please go ahead, and many of you, being spirited people, have already taken off for the races. So
one difference is the pace, Thiagi. I see that in the chat box, is the pace.
Right, exactly. Yep. Thinkers versus feelers. I must be schizophrenic.
They both have goals, right?
Yep. Similarity between these two. They are both looking for the end result, like you said, goal. Do you see any other interesting comparison, Tracy?
Both like to do interactions with people. Okay, the considerate asks, the direct tells, so that's a different, right?
Yep. And the empathy is a difference between these two kinds. So folks, this is a compare game using the fluency cards. In a tabletop type of a game, instead of a webinar game, somebody will pull out a card and read the two things, and everybody will quickly write down one similarity, one difference, and they will read what they have written down. The person who pulled out the cards will act as the judge and decide, okay, the statement by Karen Andres, hey, Karen keeps on typing responses to everything. She must be one of the communication style groups called the pushy type. So we say Karen wins because her similarity and difference were both accurate and intriguing, or something like that. So that's what you do with the diamond cards.
And another different version, another different question you might ask in comparing and contrasting might be, what might the email look, how might a direct communicator and a considerate communicator send an email? What would be the differences? What would be the similarities? Another one might be how you would compare one profile to another profile of how they would answer the phone. So different things. You can definitely change it out to in different ways. So another type of
balance these tasks by having 13 cards of listing, 13 cards of comparing, and 13 cards of role-playing.
And role-playing is next. Or we call them acting. And would you please advance the slide? There we go. Yes. Okay, so we have an example of here of what the hearts cards look like, and these are acting out. So typically you would find a scenario, and in this case the scenario is titled "You're Fired." And your role as a person who pulled this card is to be a spirited manager.
The other person's role is to be a systematic employee. So here's the situation. The manager must fire the employee, and the employee has an evidence that the firing is not warranted. So Thiagi, let's give them an example by playing this out. I want to be the manager.
You always want to be the manager. You never let me be the manager, but that's okay.
All right, so let's play this situation out. All right, so as a manager and as a spirited manager, which is so far-fetched for me to be spirited, right? Okay, so Thiagi, I have some great news for you. Remember when you told me you wanted to play more golf and you wanted to have more time with your family members? Well, I have great news because you're going to have more time to do that now.
Could you be more precise, please? When you say golf, you mean what kind of golf?
You know that the golf you're always talking about. I see those pictures of golf in your cubicle, and I know you love to play golf so much. And my gosh, you're going to have all the time you need to really get your golf game where you want it to be.
Thank you. But does it mean I get a golf scholarship? The company is paying me to go play golf?
Well, that's not exactly what we mean, Thiagi, but we are really happy that you're going to have more time to do that. So, in any case, you get the example here of what the scenarios might be. And if they were to play it in a classroom situation, Thiagi, how might it be a little bit different?
Okay. One approach we use, we have tables of 3 people each. One person takes the card, reads the situation, and randomly says, for this particular round, I want Pablo to be the manager, and I want Barbara to be the employee, and here is the situation, and we want you to understand what style you are portraying, and you're going to have a conversation. And I am going to listen to the role play and decide how well did the 2 players play their role. The person who is supposed to be spirited, did he or she act as spirited within the scenario, things of that nature. And at the end of a 2-minute role play, what happens is I, who pulled out the card, who is in charge, who is the judge, gives number of points from 1 to 5 to each of the players. And the turn to be the judge keeps rotating, and at the end of 3 role plays, you count the total number of points which were awarded by the 2 other people as judges, and whoever has the most point becomes a style master or something like that. So that's one way we can play this game in a face-to-face situation, Tracy.
And if you didn't get all that, no worries. You can download that booklet that Sarah will provide for you later on, and it'll explain it in the same or even more detail than Thiagi systematically just gave to you. But let me ask you this. Remember at the beginning when I had you take that self-assessment? Well, we would like you to take another self-assessment now. Now that you've had some opportunity to engage with the content, how well would you rate yourself on your understanding of the HRDQ style profiles now? On a 1, not confident, I don't get it at all, or I'm a 5, I'm an expert. Type in the chat box, where do you rate yourself? Okay, wow, I'm seeing a lot of 4s and 5s now, much more than before, Thiagi. Wow, see? And that's the whole point of playing the card games, right, is to build a fluency with the content. So if you want to make your own cards, we're going to talk to you about it or share with you how you can do it. To make your own cards, you just have to have content. These are just frames for you to use, right, or templates, and you can load in your own content as we have done with the HRDQ style profiles.
And Tracy, if anybody wants to create a classification card game, you have to ask yourself what topic among the various training topics I'm working on consists of a set of categories or set of classes so things can be classified. For example, here the style was the 4-level classification. So could you all take a minute and think of things you're teaching which contains various categories or various classes? For example, to give another example, if you are teaching people how to give feedback, maybe there are critical feedback, there are constructive feedback, there are positive feedback, there is praiseworthy feedback, things of that nature. So if you want to use the classification card games, you use it to teach a group of categories which are very important. So if somebody has an idea of where you can use this kind of a card game, time management sounds good. Various types of interruption could be the category system and things of that nature. So that's what you do with classification cards. With practical advice cards, all you need to do is to ask people, read the literature, come up with a set of 52 pieces of advice on anything you want to teach, like how to conduct exciting webinars. So you can have piece of advice on the cards. And for the fluency cards, as Tracy demonstrated earlier, you can have concepts for which people can make lists. You can have paths of concepts where people can compare and contrast them. You can have concepts for which people can draw pictures, and you can have scenarios for which people can do some role playing. So that's how you make your own cards. If all of these sounds like useless, time-consuming thing, go to the second bullet, Tracy.
Yeah, go to the HRDQ store because you'll find the cards already created. The classification cards are there, and you'll be able to download, have all the games either in the handbook or in the CD file, or you'll be able to have that feedback table already created for you. So if you want to see it already done, I would recommend going to the HRDQ store or HRDQ store at hrdqstore.com. And if you want information on how to create the practical advice or the fluency cards, well, then I recommend you go to where, Thiagi?
To Thiagi.com, and you will see various games associated with different types of cards. For example, another type of cards is the Photo Jolts card. And so there are many, many different types of cards you can use. The three we talked about today are probably the most versatile, flexible, useful decks of cards.
And if you haven't gone to Thiagi's website before, I highly recommend you do it. Thiagi creates a new game every single day. They're not always all card games, but they're all different kinds of games. And his game blog is there for you for free as a resource, and I highly recommend that you go there. You'll find a lot of different resources available to you.
And Paula said we can do a classification card game on conflict styles. Excellent idea. Avoidance, competition, compromise, collaboration, accommodation. Which category does this behavior belong to, Tracy?
I think that I'd like to thank everybody for participating today, and I'd like to thank you, Thiagi, for partnering up with me today as well.
Hey, it is tough to be interacting, me being a direct, systematic person to be interacting with a spirited person.
Well, we both want to thank HRDQ-U for having us facilitate this session with you today. I know it's something that excites us both, and we hope that we were able to share with you some information that you'll be able to use in your training sessions as well.
Okay,
And
great.
that's the cue for Sarah.
Yeah, I'm still here. That was great. Thank you so much. And we have Tracy and Thiagi's contact information on this screen. So if you would like to go ahead and contact them, if you have any questions after the session, you can go ahead and do that. And we do actually have about a few minutes for a live Q&A. So attendees, why don't you go ahead, if you have any questions, go ahead and type them into the chat box. And while we wait for those questions to come in, let me share a little bit about the program that is the foundation of today's session. And from the Thiagi group, Playing with Style is a collection of card games for employee and management development training. It improves the knowledge of personality style and interpersonal skills. And for a limited time, this will be on sale for 25% off. And you can go ahead and purchase this at HRDQ.com. And for the links that Tracy was talking about for the booklets, we will include those in the Q&A email that we'll send out next week. So, and on another side note, we are also excited that we're hosting the first ever 5-day ROI boot camp at the end of April. And you can always register for the, that webinar at HRDQ.U.com. Okay, perfect. And we do actually have a number of questions coming in. So why don't I go ahead and get that started. Our first question is from Pat. What should you do if you don't have a lot of time to play card games?
Thiagi, I can start off with an answer to that one. Is you will recognize is that there are many card games that move very quickly. In fact, one of them we call a speed, and it plays very fast. So some of them do take a little bit longer, but some of them you can play very quickly. Thiagi, do you want to add to that?
Yep. What do you do if you don't have time to play card games? Give them death by PowerPoint, a deadly dull, boring lecture. Pretend dumping data is the same thing as training. In case you didn't realize it, that was a sarcastic comment.
Yeah. You could recognize, we did that self-assessment at the beginning of this session and the self-assessment later, and I bet many of you were already familiar with the HRDQ profile, so you probably were already at a 4 or a 5. But I'm guessing that many of your participants, when you're first introducing it, just introducing a topic to somebody isn't enough. You really do need to allow enough time for them to engage with the content, for them to build that fluency, to truly understand. Otherwise, you can't assume when they walk away that they will remember it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And our next question is from, coming from Kate. Do you ever get any negative reactions to playing with the cards?
All the time, and I keep asking people, why are you unhappy about that? And I also try to tell people we have data that shows playing cards in these ways increase a person's ability to recall and apply different pieces of principles and procedures. So our usual approach is you run a group without playing cards, give me the same time, I will run the group with the playing cards and let somebody who is an external objective observer collect 4 levels of evaluation data to see which one creates better things. So sometimes people have religious or cultural objections when you say card games. We don't call them card games in those situations. We tell them we are going to be interacting with non-computerized group decision support system. or we are going to be using a modified delta technique to make sure we make decisions that are appropriate for all stakeholders, or something fancy like that?
Well, I can tell you that I play card games all the time, and I can tell you that I never get a negative response. I don't want to scare the people out there that you get it all the time, because I can share with you that most people are really happy to not just have to listen passively, but to actually engage with the content, and that interaction with each other really makes it challenging and fun.
Okay, great. Thank you. And looks like we might have time for just one more. This one is coming from Sam. What's the difference between the practical advice cards and the fluency cards in coaching for performances? Are the profile styles EEOC compliant?
Sounded like two different questions. Are the profile styles EEOC compliant? Haven't got a clue. In terms of the previous question, what is the difference between the practical advice cards and the fluency cards? One way of differentiating them is to say fluency cards deal with the what and the why of a concept, whereas the practical advice cards deal with the how of a concept. So practical advice cards, they all contain tips for the day, as it were, whereas fluency cards require you to do 4 different types of things.
Okay, great. And we do have time for just one more. This one is coming from Mark. Do participants think this is too playful for a work environment?
I personally have not experienced that, and and it all depends on how you present it, how you present the activity. If you, like Thiagi said earlier, if you're working with a group of systematic people who don't seem as playful as another group, then you might just present it in a more serious mode. I think it's all in the way you approach the activity.
And just to add on to that, the new generation, the new hires we are hiring have been brought up on video games. They come from a game-based generation. They have no problem at all. The people who have objection to playing games are those who are all-the-time trainers. And as somebody told recently when I asked him, what do you think is going to be the major change in the training approach? He looked at me and he said, I know for sure 10 years from now you'll be dead. So the participants are now waiting for the older generation of trainers to drop dead so they can have fun and they can learn by active responding and playing and things of that nature.
Yes, perfect. And Tracy and Thiagi, would you just like to add any final thoughts before I go ahead and wrap up this session?
I just want to encourage everybody to try them. I think that you'll find that it takes your training to another new level, and it's fresh. It's a fresh approach to training. So I hope you'll try it out.
And my final thought is, Sarah, would you please wrap up this session and send everybody home so they can play games?
I will. Thank you so much. That is all the time we have for today. If we did not get time to answer your questions, you will receive an email response with those answered questions next week. And again, we will include that free booklet, the links that Tracy was talking about earlier in the session. So we appreciate your time, and we hope you found today's webinar informative.